typing in the field, it's actually added the bit that I started typing in front of the name. So you just need to make sure that that isn't in there, right? Otherwise, the filter won't work. Now that I've put my name in the filter, in the name that I want in the filter, I just click OK. The filter will be applied to the form. From here, I simply go to Add to Workspace again. Keep in the workspace, I want it to be purchase order, receipt, and follow-up, and the presentation to be a tile. And then I just click Configure. Right. On the pop-up that comes through, you simply add your name, or what you want to call it. So I'll just go voices. All right, and click OK. Sorry, guys. So I think it's being very slow. So I think we're getting a bit of lag behind what I'm doing and what you can see. So apologies for that. Once again, we will send out the written instructions for this, just because I know it is a bit hard to follow when I'm speaking and the system's about 2 minutes behind me. But once again, we've now added it to our dashboard. So I'm going to jump back to the home page, check my dashboard. I'm going to go to, so you go to prepare a dashboard, I'm going to go to purchase order, receipt, and follow-up, and we can see that I now have another tile that's been set up. No, it's you. So I have another tile that's set up that's just going to link me straight to Shirley's invoices if I need to go check there again. Right, and it also keeps a running total of the invoices so I can see what's going on and how many that are in the queue. So once again, you can do this setup for yourself just so you can get keep a better track of what's your purchase orders and the invoices you have going. You can also set this up for other people in your team if you need to keep track of someone, if someone's going on leave or these kind of things, or if you're sharing a job and you want to be able to see the invoices that are in each other's queue. This is definitely the best way to keep track of it by adding these tiles to your dashboard. All right. So something that has also come up a few times is around receiving blanket purchase orders. We know a few people have had some issues doing that. So one of the really key things to be careful of when receiving purchase orders is around not receiving the full amount, how to delete the lines and doing that. So I'm going to quickly demo that as we go. You might have to re-get the question. So where I'm going to go to the left-hand menu. I'm going to go to procurement and sourcing and all purchase orders. And I'm going to grab a purchase order. Right, so I'm going to do the receipting for this one through the purchase order, just because it'll allow me to look in there without actually generating the receipt and not messing with anyone's receipting or invoicing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to receive and then generate product receipt. Right. So when I'm in the receipting screen, what I can see here is I need to put my invoice number in or my receiving reference in the product receipt field. Right? When I scroll down here, so the really important thing here, guys, is to not hit OK after you do this, because it will receipt the full amount of your order. But you always need to make sure you scroll down to the line section to make sure that we are updating the quantity. So this one, I'm just going to put a value in here. We put the delivery date to the date we received the good or service. And I'm going to scroll down. Now, so this blanket order has multiple purchase order lines. You can see it's set for a number of sites. What we do with this is you select the lines that you do not require over here. All right, sorry, so someone just put a quick question through around what goes in this product receipt field here. It doesn't actually matter. It's a free text field. If you have the invoice already, you can put the invoice number in there. If you don't have the invoice, you can just put initials date. I wouldn't necessarily recommend putting the purchase order number in there because it's a double up, but it's a free text field. It's about putting in a meaningful reference. So invoice number if you have it, delivery docket if you have it, and if you don't have either of those, you can just put initials date. It's probably the best way to do it. Okay, so to delete the lines we don't require, I'm just going to select multiple. You can tick the ones you don't want. You click delete, and it will remove those excess lines from your purchase order. And you scroll across. Oh, catch up. We scroll across to the right. We can see our quantity field where the dollar value is, where the remaining funds on the purchase order is. You overwrite this with the value of your receipt, and then you click OK, right? So the key things that you want to check is that you delete the excess lines and you update the quantity. We know it's really tempting to just, after you've done this first bit here, to click OK, but that will receipt the full amount of the order, and we need to be very careful not to do that. All right, so I'm just going to cancel out of this one so I don't accidentally receipt this order. So what you can do as part of the receipting process is you can always check your receipts to see how much you're receipted for, just in case you're a little worried you're receipted for all of it by accident. This is one big giveaway if you've receipted it all by accident, is that you won't be able to generate any more product receipts. But to check the value of your receipt, you simply, under journals, go to product receipt. Right. If we go in here, we can see the receipts we've done previously. If you're using the receipt invoice number in the product receipt field, you can see those invoices here as well. Right. Once you've got your receipt, you just click on lines up the top. This will show you the value of your receipt. Right. So we can scroll across. We can see the line started with $5,000. We've received $181.50. This amount field next to it actually shows you the dollar amount exclusive of GST, right? And then it shows you the remaining quantity of the line. Right. So you can check your previous receipts for previous receipts there. If you want to see some invoices that you've receipted against you've processed previously against the purchase order, you can use the invoice tab up here, and under journals, any invoices that have been processed and paid will show up under invoice. If I open this up, you can see the invoice that we'd actually seen in the receiving screen has flowed all the way through, and it's been paid. Let's process the payment. Okay. I think that might just cover off what we're going to show through today. So one thing also I would like to emphasize as well is we do know the system's working a lot better in Google Chrome currently than it is in Internet Explorer. We are working on it, but we would recommend going through Google Chrome for the meantime. So I'm going to go through the questions that we have in chat now, and then I'll. So if you've got anything else you want me to cover, please put them in the chat. All right. So the first question is: I have a Sodexo invoice. However, I need to receive a refund for. So this is a credit note, right? The credit note should be processed via accounts payable. So if you have a credit note sitting in your scan and capture queue, just return it to the accounts payable team. They'll do the coding on it. They'll get it set up, and then they'll do the processing for you. So you guys don't do receipts you don't do negative receipts, right? Accounts payable will process the credit note. All right. So we've covered. All right, so the next question is, I have a query regarding old PO and invoice that I've forwarded to invoice email but haven't received on the scan and capture queue. So there is at least a 24-hour delay from invoices that you send through to invoices at Uniting. It should come through to your scan and capture queue eventually. One thing to note is if the purchase order was not on this invoice, it will not get automatically assigned to you. If there's no purchase order, someone in accounts payable has to manually assign it to you, right? So that means there may be a further delay in that process for getting that invoice through to you. If you're really keen, you can check in the all scan and capture queue. So on the left-hand menu, you go to accounts payable. And then you go to scan and capture queue as opposed to my scan and capture queue. Right. And you can search via the invoice number in here, and you can see if it's floating in there that hasn't been assigned. Right? So you can check in here, and then you can action it from here if required.
And just on that note, Nadia, if the invoice had the PO and you had already actioned your receipt and everything matched, it would not appear in your My Scan and Capture queue. It would just flow through to AP for processing because everything would have matched.
All right. All right. So, question. I have made an error. How do you change it? I'm assuming you're referring to making an error on doing a receipt. So, with the receipting errors, currently it is a bit of a pain to fix them because the system's automatically linking them to the invoices. If you made an error receipting, just raise a ticket and we'll try and get to it as soon as possible. We need to delink the invoice from it and then allow you to correct it. Because if you try and do the correction now, it'll just give you an error saying it's linked to an invoice. All right, next question is, if my invoice is not in the not processed queue and the total construction line is 0 and the gross amount status has failed, what do I do? Okay, so if you've got an invoice in your queue, I'm just going to jump to the scan and capture queue.
Michelle. Oh, it's really lagging. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, it's just lagging a little bit behind. The screen's a little bit slow comparatively to the audio. Okay.
That's right. All right, guys. So I'm in the scan and capture queue, and so if you have an invoice in here, so I'll just grab one at random. Okay, you can see that it's not processed. We have the gross account match is saying failed, and then we have no lines here, right? So this is basically just an unprocessed invoice, right? We've got two things that potentially need to happen here. We can see in this example, if this hasn't been receipted, right? We can see there is no purchase order reference against this invoice, which means the AP don't know how to process this. They don't know which order it relies to, right? The first thing you need to do is you need to edit it and add your purchase order number to this invoice. Once you've added the purchase order, from here you have two options. If you've already receipted the invoice, you use the generate lines option to pull that receipt through and onto this, and then it'll take it out of your queue. If you haven't done the receipt, use the post product receipt button up the top, which will become available once you put a purchase order in to do the receipt, and then once again, it will remove it from your queue, right? Once you do the receipt, that's what creates the line on the invoice, and then that line is what matches against the gross amount and gives you that pass status. You guys don't normally see that once you've done the receipt because it automatically moves it to accounts payables queue for that. All right, so next question. Can we add two purchase order numbers to an invoice in scan and capture queue? So the short answer to this one is no. The scan and capture queue does not allow for multiple purchase orders to be linked to one invoice. You can, however, do the receipt across two purchase orders if you have to. You just need to tell accounts payable that there is a separate receipt they need to find on a different purchase order, right? So we can't link two in the scan and capture queue, but if you do have two receipts across two different purchase orders, you just do the receipting on the purchase orders, and then in the scan and capture queue, you need to tell accounts payable about the second receipt that's there in the comments field. So you just assign it and tell accounts payable that you have two purchase orders for this invoice. All right, the next question is, I received an email that I had a Toshiba invoice to receipt and could not find the old CPO, so I created a new blanket purchase order. And okay, so the program is not letting you edit to add your purchase order in. Okay, an interesting one. So normally it should allow you to edit. Right, so as a default, the purchase order field will be grayed out. Sorry, I'm just catch up. Purchase order will be grayed out. It should allow you to enter the purchase order by clicking edit at the top. Now, if you get an error when you enter the purchase order, it may be because you're using the wrong value. So something to be very careful about is if you've raised a new order, I'll just go through procurement and sourcing, purchase requisitions. Right, if you've raised a new order, you need to make sure you're using the purchase order number, not the purchase requisition number. So in this case, right, so I think this is the requisition in question, right? We need to make sure we're not using the 00843 number, right? That's the requisition number. You need to use your purchase order number, which you can find down here in the details under purchase order. This 05 number, right? So make sure you're referencing the right number when you're trying to put that in the field there, because that might be what's giving you the error. All right, next question is, I have an invoice that's still not being paid. The vendor is telling me they have not received a PO and is confused what to do. What can I do to ensure they're paid? Okay, so depends on what's going on with this. If the vendor has not received the PO, you need to let us know which vendor this is, and we'll check the contact details that we have for them and confirm that. That said, if you have the invoice, you can still put the purchase order number on it and do the receipt and process it through. And it'll still work as long as you link the invoice to the purchase order number. So if that's the case, you want to just send us an email raise a ticket for this one, and we'll work through this one in a bit more detail. Right. All right. So the next question is if the purchase order, if it has a PO and already received, how does generate lines work? So normally how it works is it basically just forces the system to check against that purchase order, and it'll pull in lines against the invoice. So unfortunately, I can't demonstrate that right now, just because I don't want to mess with someone's invoice. But as long as you have the purchase order number in there and you know the receipt's been done, clicking generate lines will
They're like the receipt lines. It's almost pulling the receipt lines across. So whatever you've created against the receipt is then pulled across to the invoice.
All right, so next question is, are they going to change it so we can close off purchase orders ourselves like we do in Basware? Sending it to FSC is double handling. Yes, I am well aware that it is double handling at this point. It's just a slight tweak in the access we need to make sure. The issue is because it's editing purchase orders, there's a lot of things that you guys shouldn't be able to do in that space, so they need to be really careful about this access. We are definitely something we're going to do change going forward, because I'm also a little tired of canceling everyone's purchase orders. That said, something to note, guys, we can only cancel purchase orders. We cannot delete them out of the system. So there's only cancellation. All right, so next question. I have about 12 invoices in my scanner capture queue, which I have added the purchase order number. They have not been removed. So if you've added the purchase order number and you've done the receipt, just go in there, click the generate lines, and it should take them out of your queue. If you still need to do the receipt, just use the post-product receipt option, and that should help clear them out of your queue. So the next question is, do you need to enter information into the main account section? Okay, so this is an important one, so I am going to demonstrate this one. And the short answer to this is that we do not enter any value into the main account field. So just so everyone knows what we're talking about, I'm just going to jump into a requisition. So some of you would have encountered this field. It's down in the financial dimensions section under main account. Now, I'll just catch up. This field does not need to be populated. So if you open the drop-down, you will see a list of general ledger accounts in here, but we do not populate the general ledger here. The general ledger account gets populated based on the category you pick. Do not put anything in the main account field here. If you do, it can cause problems later on when we're trying to receipt the purchase orders if you use the wrong category, right? If it clashes with the category, it will cause an error on the purchase order, and we can't fix it at the purchase order, which means you have to completely restart this. So you can just leave it blank. The general ledger code gets populated based on the category, so don't put anything in this main account field. All right, so we've got another question about generating lines in the scanner capture queue. So I am going to jump in and try and do an example. Okay, so I'm going to jump into an invoice. I'm going to have to be very careful here because I don't want to mess anything up too badly for someone. So we can see here that we have our purchase order number is here. We have our, right? So we believe that the receipt's already been done. What I am going to do is I'm going to quickly click on the purchase order to jump through to check the receipting, just to make sure. Receive. Okay, So the generate lines option only works if you have a receipt already done in the system. For these invoices where if you click generate lines, it means there's no receipt done. If you need to do a receipt for these invoices, you use the post-product receipt option up the top here. And this will allow you to generate a receipt for this invoice. Right. So if the generate lines doesn't work, it's because there is no receipt available for it to find. You need to go in and do post-product receipt and generate the receipt. Once you've done that, it will take it out of your queue. Once again, just to be careful when receiving the blanket orders, let me just confirm this is. All right, we just have 6. Right, so just be careful when you're receiving this order that you want to make sure you update the quantity in the receipt screen. Sorry, so I'll just do it from here. So in the receipt screen, you want to make sure you update the quantity to match per invoice, right? So you don't want to receipt all of them as one. You want to just update this to 1 per invoice and do the receipts like that. Okay, next question. All right, the next question is, I have an invoice that has been receipted, but the vendor says not paid yet and refusing to provide the product to the client. How to check if paid? So you can do it through your purchase order. As mentioned before, it's under, let's have a look. So if I go to all purchase orders, and I'm just going to find one that I know has an invoice against it. Right. Right. So under invoice, I can see we have an option for journals, and then this will show me invoices that have been linked to the purchase order and whether they've been paid. Right, so if they're in here, they should have been paid, is my understanding. If you need clarification on this, please go through accounts payable though. I know they are having a bit of a backlog and there are some issues on their end. So if you want confirmation, do double check with accounts payable to make sure everything's okay. And they can also help if there is an issue with the invoice. All right, the next question we've got is, why did I receive notification that I invoiced in thin client to receipt on Monday? So sorry about this, guys. I thought some communication went out about this, but obviously not. Due to an error made by someone in the project team, Basware temporarily became active again for about a couple of hours, and it sent a bunch of people some emails asking them to action invoices in your thin client. You can just disregard this. There's no need to action any invoices in your thin client. Sorry about that one. It was a bit of a mistake, but it shouldn't happen again. You shouldn't get any more communications from thin client. Okay, so they haven't come back in Worksmart Dynamics though. Okay, if those invoices are ones that you still expect to be processed, do just raise a ticket with us and we'll investigate that. My understanding was only showing old invoices that should not have been available to see. So we will look into that one for you. So the next question, I get a message, PO not matching, how do I find the correct PO? Please enter PO state. So I imagine, sorry, so the question is, I get a message, PO not matching, how do I find the correct PO? So I assume this is a message that's been provided on an invoice in the scan and capture queue by the accounts payable team. You do just need to double check that using the right PO reference, which is the 05 numbers for the new ones or the PO18 for the old ones, just to make sure you're not using a requisition number or an incorrect reference. Okay. All right, so I've got another question around, okay. So we're going to look at an individual invoice. So we're going to check around the generate lines functionality again. So I'm going to go back to the scan and capture queue. Okay, so I'm looking at this invoice in the scan and capture queue. Once again, it's correctly linked to a purchase order, which is good, but we don't have any lines created. So what I'm going to quickly do is I'm going to jump through to the purchase order to check if there's been any receipting before I try and force it to find the receipt. Received. So yep, we can see there's a product receipt for this one, right? And the product receipt was for invoice U897. Come back to the invoice, U897. Okay. I'll go generate lines. Okay, so it hasn't worked as mentioned by the user. Now, I'm pretty sure the reason this hasn't worked is that receipt's been picked up by another invoice. So if I go to invoice, I can see there's been an invoice pushed against this purchase order. Right, there you go. So it looks like we've got a duplicate in the system.
No.
987, yep.
897.
So it looks like we've already processed what looks like a very similar invoice. Right? So let me just double check what we got in our scan and capture queue. Sorry, I'll actually just duplicate this to make it a bit easier. Get out of the way. All of them. Sorry guys, it's going to look a bit jumpy as I jump around trying to figure this one out. So apologies for that. All right, so in the scan and capture queue, yep, we have an invoice that says 987. And a tax invoice journal, we got 897. Okay, that's a little confusing. Let me check this. October. Now, I'm a little cautious here because these invoices are both dated on the same date, right? 30th of October, and they appear to be for an identical amount. Now, this is something we want to go potentially check with our vendor here because it looks like they've double invoiced us, but under two different invoice numbers. Right? And these invoices look identical, right? So this is something we need to go back on the vendor here because we have two invoices that look identical on the same invoice date for the same amount, but have a slightly different invoice number. Right, so in this example, you should go back to your vendor and confirm which one of these is correct because we've clearly paid one of them, but I'm not sure that we should be paying both of them unless I'm wrong. But these are, all right. If you need some further help with this one, just let us know and we'll get onto this for you. But I think it looks like we've got a duplicate invoice. All right, so the next question we've got, how are providers supposed to enter the PO number on the invoices? It should just be the number that's provided on the purchase order. It's the 05 number. They don't need to put PO at the front of it. We will pick it up, right? So it doesn't need any specific reference. It just needs to be 05, whatever the number is. All right, so we've got another question about sending my invoice in and I still can't locate it. So I'm going to have a quick look for you to see if I can find that invoice. Right, so I'm in the all scan and capture queue. number.
45137.
Right, so I can't find it either. That doesn't mean it's not necessarily here, but it might be under a different reference number. I am. Should be. Sorry, say invoice number again.
45137.
All right. So with that missing invoice, something to be careful is we'll have to come back to you on that one. We do know for some of the invoices for smaller providers, they do occasionally just get the scan and capture clicks them out as if it's not a correct invoice. But we'll need to follow up on that one with you. All right. Next question. I go to scan and capture queue, get an error, PO not matching receipt has a PO on it. All right. How do I get correct PO? So I'm not 100% sure how to answer this one right now. We might take that as note and we'll give you a call after the session, Diane, just to help you through with this one. Next question. I have received a purchase order before the invoice was received. However, a few days later, I received an email saying that I need to receive the goods, but I already have. If that invoice is sitting in your scan and capture queue, you may need to go in there and link the purchase order to it and click generate lines. If the purchase order was on the invoice, you shouldn't receive, it shouldn't have come back to you, but it might have been because the vendor didn't reference the purchase order correctly or the system failed to pick up the purchase order. If that's the case, you will need, if it's in your scan and capture queue, you will need to process it through. So once again, we have another question about how to check an invoice has been paid. The easiest way to see it is through your purchase order. Jump through. So I've just gone to all purchase orders. I'm going to select an invoice, a vendor, or purchase order, sorry. Get it right eventually. A purchase order that I know has been paid. So under invoice, we have journals, invoice. This will show us the paid invoices that have been raised, that are against this purchase order. So you can check through here. Okay, so that looks like all the questions we have so far. So obviously there's 2 points we need to take away and we'll cycle back with you around. Once again, if you have any further questions, you can send them through to FSC inquiries and we will get to them eventually. Sorry, we know there is a bit of delay in us responding to tickets, just as we're trying to get everything working with the system. So I apologize about that again, but we will try and get to everything eventually. And yeah, so as I said, there'll be some stuff will come out after the session just detailing the steps for what I went over today and anything else that we need to follow up with. And yeah, thanks for your time, guys.